All right, we have Dr. Luan Pereira de Oliveira. As soon as I try to say that out loud, I'm going to mess it up. Talking about some high-tech tools of our project on using UAV for imaging healthier grapes for the Southeast.
I'm going to try to keep you guys entertained because it's right after lunch, and I'm pretty sure you're sleepy. I'm chewed. And Sarah sent me a message, say, hey, can I use the presentation the way it is? I said, yes, but I didn't know I forgot to put a picture right there of a drone, but that's fine. My name is Luan Oliveira. I'm a precision ag extension specialist with the University of Georgia. So I'm precision ag. I apply precision agriculture tools just for specialty crops, so which includes grapes, muscadines. I'm here to talk about high-tech tools for healthier grapes, UAV imaging in the Southeast. This was part of a grant through the Small Fruit Consortium that Sarah got. Ben Reeves, which is here, worked with us as well in that grant. And my job was to fly a drone over an orchard to see if we could estimate nitrogen and other nutrient contents just by using the drone. I cannot start talking about drones without explaining what a drone is, right? I'm from Brazil, so when people talk about drones with us, like when I didn't have an agriculture background, I imagined those military big things. But for agriculture, they're nice. You see, we have different types: multi-rotor, hybrid, fixed wings. These multi-rotors, these are the most common ones on the market. They take off vertically and they fly horizontally to anywhere you want. Fixed wings, you need actually a slingshot to put them in the air, or a really, I would say, strong arm. And the hybrids, they fly as a multi-rotor, but actually they take off as a multi-rotor and they fly as a fixed wing. Those are the differences. And I cannot also talk about the results that we got without telling you what remote sensing is. So in agriculture, we use this term a lot. In precision agriculture, we use this term a lot. It's called remote sensing. As the name says, it's basically me going to the field and collecting data from the plant, sometimes without even going to the field, without being there physically, without touching the plant. So I'm sensing the symptoms, I'm sensing shapes without touching, without measuring, and everything is ground truthed. Like, for example, we fly the drone and then we ground truth later. That's the way it is being done now. And that could be done through satellites, that could be done through airplanes, and also, as you see here, drone. And we use a lot of different sensors for that. This is an RGB sensor. It's basically your phone camera. A multispectral, that gets a little bit more complicated because it does have the RGB, which is red, green, and blue, but it also has a near infrared and a red edge sensors. And keep this in mind: the NIR and red edge, and the hyperspectral. You know, like here I have I can collect 5 different types of data, and here with the hyperspectral is like 200. 300. And with a thermal camera, this thing is getting popular more and more and more, not only in agriculture, but also on disaster relief or hunting, everything. People use thermal cameras because they capture the heat. So why NIR is important, why near infrared and red edge are important for agriculture. So think about every day we have the sunlight, right? Sun shines. Some of that light gets absorbed, some of that light gets transmitted, and some of that light also gets reflected. It happens every time, everywhere. And the only reason we see things is because the light is reflecting in the object, which also makes our eyes sensors. We see things, but what we actually see is the reflectance from the light on the objects, because if there's no light, we cannot see, right? And here is what we can see. We can see, this is the whole light spectrum, okay? we can see in between 400 and 780 nanometers. Those are the wavelengths of the light that we can see. But we cannot see ultraviolet, X-ray, gamma ray, infrared, microwaves, radio waves, because that's beyond the capacity of our eyes seeing those things. I know it's complicated. Why that's important, Luan? That's important because the leaves, the plants, they behave differently when they are stressed, when they are dead, and when they are healthy. And that's where the NIR, the near infrared, gets interesting, because as you see here, this is a dead leaf. A dead leaf reflects a lot of red. It reflects a lot of near infrared as well. When that that leaf is just stressed, it doesn't reflect a lot of red. It reflects more green. That's why we see, right, those green plants when they are really healthy. But when they're really, really healthy, they reflect the same amount of green, but they reflect a lot of near infrared. We cannot see the near infrared, right? So that's why we use those cameras. And these are just examples of maps. And if I can find an index that would tell me a range from -1 to 1, saying, hey, -1 is really red, and 1 is really green, it is reflecting a lot of near infrared, that would help me a lot. So that's what researchers in the past they did. If you have heard about NDVI before, that's a vegetation index. It stands for Normalized Difference Vegetation Index. Red is bad. It represents a dead leaf. And a lot of near infrared is good. It represents a lot of vigor on that plant. So here's basically a simple math equation. The near infrared minus the red divided by the near infrared plus the red. So I normalized the difference. I have an index from -1 to 1, where 1 tells me that that plant is really healthy, and -1 tells me that plant is stressed or dead. Why that's important? Because when plants are well fertilized, they tend to be more on the green side, right? Like when you put a lot of nitrogen in corn. For corn and soybeans, this is a lot advanced. For example, there are researchers that take decisions based on NDRE for irrigation. So when the NDRE is low, irrigate. When the NDRE is high, don't irrigate. Those plants are good for now. What we did on the grapes, we had 5 sides, right, Sarah? And that was a video. My videos are not playing. This presentation doesn't like me for some reason. So the drone was here, takes off, mapped the whole field, and comes back, gives me a map. So based on that map, as you see there, and hopefully this one is going to play. Yeah, this one's going to play. So this is an NIR map of a field. And yeah, I'm just showing there, I'm zooming in so we can see the different plants there. I'm gonna put color back so you can see what I'm trying to say. And then I can determine how accurate I want that image, how much resolution I want, basically. It's like filming or taking pictures with an old camera versus a brand new one. And that's a map. That's a plant health map right there, an NDVI map. Here you see a lot of green stuff, right? I'm going to pause right there. We see a lot of green right here, really like dark green strips going to the middle. So when we're generating maps like that, we often get confused because we don't see what's that. We don't know where's that. So what we have to do, we have to capture the spectral signature from the plant and remove everything else. So we use AI. We use artificial intelligence to tell me, hey, pretty much anything that's below this threshold, remove, which is the soil, the grass, and everything. And I only have the vines right there in that picture in the middle. So I'm going to pause again. And we can look at the map by itself. We see some greener spots right there, some reddish spots right there. And by that map, I can take some samples. So that's what we did. So we went to the field, and yep, actually 4 sites, right? Three sites here in Georgia and North Carolina, and we collected samples, nitrogen, leaf tissue samples, right, from several places. Thank you, Ben, and the guys that helped it. That was a big work, a big teamwork. And let me go back a little bit. So it changes with time. So I cannot just do what I call spatial variability, but I have to do temporal variability as well. This is just one field, and that first picture right there is June 8th, and that second one is July the 20th. So there is a spatial, like the variability inside of the field, and then the temporal, because things are changing also according with the time. So we went there, we flew the drone, and then we know exactly where we collected those tissue samples. And we wanted to know, hey, can I use the drone to estimate the nitrogen? And this is just, I would say, the values, right, for nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And a lot of variability also on nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium on all the fields we got. And again, this is at Bloom and Verizon, a lot of variability. And the answer that we got firsthand, it was a yes or no. Hey, can I estimate nitrogen just by using drone? The answer was no. However, we got some extra good results. So for example, what you see in front of you is a really busy graph that we call heat map. So as the name says, when it's pretty hot or pretty cold, there's a correlation. So that correlation could be positive or negative. So here you see on the bottom there is the NDRE. That's the normalized difference red edge. The red edge is the least red band that we cannot see as well, right before near infrared. So the red edge was negatively correlated with sulfur. And this is a strong correlation. So next time I fly a drone and I see a lot of normalized difference red edge, I can infer that that field is in need of some sulfur because that's negative, okay? Same thing for the NDVI with sulfur. So both of them were pretty strong. Here, NDVI with sodium as well, like 0.51. We got a 0.36, I believe. Yeah, 0.36 with boron. Potassium as well, 0.50 with the NDRE. And NDVI as well. What are the next steps with this research? It didn't work really well for nitrogen. That's what we wanted. But we have a baseline data now to use artificial intelligence to create models, and those models are going to be stronger to estimate because they don't do only one correlation as we're doing here. They do like thousands. It's a lot of like thousands of math equations. They're going to come up with something, say, hey, if I have 1.05 of NDVI, my boron is going to be more or less this number. Here's just telling me, hey, if the NDRE is lower, the boron is higher. That's the otherwise. So with that, I will pass along to Sarah. I think we're a little bit late already, Sarah, 14 minutes. And I'll see you at the end if you have any questions.
Perfect. Oh yeah, no worries. So one, like we have this cool data. We still need to do a lot of work in order to tell us how we can use this in the field, how this can be used practically. So ideally in the future, we can use this to be like, okay, how am I gonna change what my fertilization scheme is gonna be for that? But since we're not quite there yet, I just wanna review some of the practices that we do know about how we go about doing some of our fertilization practices. So one, we like to fertilize in the spring. Bloom is about the time that we can get the most uptake. That's when those vines are uptaking the most nutrients that they possibly can. But up until that point, I'm trying to not move away from the mic. Up until that point, can you see that? No, you can't. We are mostly relying on what the reserves of those vines have. So if you are deficient in stuff, if you have a lot of stress, if you maybe defoliated leaves way too early in the season the year before, you've got fewer reserves, you're gonna get more stress. So that's why we say we wanna fertilize in the spring, up until bloom, depends on exactly what type of fertilizer you're using to how fast it can get to the vines. But that's what we're doing for that. When we talk about our tissue sampling, or our soil sampling for that, one, we want to do this either at bloom or at veraison, when the berries start to color or soften. So when that process starts to happen, because that's when we have a little bit more data to correlate what the expected values would be for that. You can technically take those samples at whatever point that you take them, but we just, the nutrients are going to change over time. Unfortunately, plant nutrition is a very convoluted, it has a lot of variables that go into it. So the more consistent that you can be for that is gonna help hopefully make sure that you can trust the information that you have more effectively. One of the questions that I get for this is what do I take? Can I just take soil tests? Can I just take tissue tests? When can I do this? For the most part, soil tests can be mostly good for checking your soil pH. If you get just a pH that is out of whack, you're going to not be able to absorb the nutrients that you need. So mostly when I'm taking soil tests, I'm checking, where is my pH close to where I want it to be, or do I need to make some adjustments for that? Tissue tests are a little bit easier. It's kind of like a tissue test to soil test is kind of like, I can either get a blood test for myself to kind of look at what my personal health is versus checking the nutrition facts on the box of Cheerios that I eat every morning. That's kind of like your soil test. That's some of the nutrients that you're getting, but it's not necessarily what you are absorbing, what is in your system. So ideally, these tissue tests are going to be a lot more helpful. If you are taking tissue tests, the things that you want to do is try to get it as close to the same time in the season as possible. Because again, things are going to change, so trying to be consistent in the timing for that, as well as being consistent in the tissue that you're taking. If you have been taking the leaf blade, so the actual leaf of that, continue to do that. If you're taking the petiole, continue to do that. If you're taking the whole leaf, so petiole and leaf blade, continue to do that because those will change. And so if you change up the tissue that you're taking, you're going to get harder results to compare over time. So trying to keep that as consistent as possible. We've talked a little bit about, I need to plug in the computer. We've talked a little bit about, would you grab the, a little bit about nitrogen. Muscadines don't show as easily as some of our other grapevines, which is a little bit trickier that they're not gonna show it as easily as possible. But one of the things that we were trying to do with this study is to look if we can adjust how much nitrogen we're putting onto those vines. If you put too much nitrogen, you're gonna be hedging those vines way too often, and no one wants to be out there more than they need to, and they just get too much vegetative growth for that. These are kind of the values that we're looking at for those tests. Again, they change over time and depending on which tissue you're taking, so kind of try to keep those in mind as you're going for that. Consistently taking your samples over time to help adjust for that.
Thank you, Sarah. Dream team. And for the last slide, I just want to let you guys know, I not only drones, but I do deal with robotics, AI, machinery for harvesting, transplanting, spraying, and everything. And I'm going to have this conference in Tifton, Georgia, May 5th and 6th of 2026. And I would like to invite you, all you guys, to join and see the technologies that are out there on the market for not only for vegetables or tree nuts, but also for grapes and vineyards, citrus, all the crops that we have here in Georgia. So that's going to be May 5th and 6th. This is just a pre-registration link, and growers are not going to pay to join. So if you're a grower, I don't know how I'm going to filter who is a grower and who's not, because I do have a garden at home. Joking. And really hopeful to see everybody there. So with that said, I'll be open to questions on the drone side. And I didn't know how to pronounce Verizon. I just learned. I think I said Verizon. But that's it. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. So next up, we are going to be switching up to diseases. So we've got Bill Klein from NC State here to talk about muscadine diseases.
Very good. Thank you, Sarah, and thank you all for having me here. Really enjoy the opportunity to come to this meeting and speak, and also just see the show. Just a tremendous and outstanding event here. So really appreciate the opportunity to come. We're going to talk a little bit about muscadine diseases. The way we'll handle this is just some generalities, show some pictures of it, and then talk about the fungicides that are out there. So I want to start by saying muscadines are tough. They are the grape of choice in the southeastern United States because they're the ones that live. And if you try to grow a lot of the bunch type grapes, they struggle with Pierce's disease, a bacterial disease of grapes. They get downy mildew, bunch grape anthracnose, botrytis gray mold, Phil, anything else that I missed, Phil Brannon, the pathologist at the University of Georgia. A lot of different diseases that you see on bunch grapes that you don't see on muscadine. So they're our grape of choice in the southeast. If we look at the diseases on them, they're primarily the ones we're going to talk about now are either leaf or fruit diseases, and they're mostly fungal pathogens. And so what you will see is symptoms on leaves, symptoms on fruit, and I'll go ahead and tell you the secret, which is by the time you see disease, it's too late. Write that down and be ready for it next year. Okay, disease control on muscadines is preventative. So you develop your history of the field, you figure out what disease problems you have, and you have to treat and have to be ready for them before symptoms appear. They're caused by fungal pathogens. The spores are microscopic. They're spread by wind, by insects. They get them on their body and move them around. They require moisture to germinate, and we do not lack for moisture in the southeast. And so no need to go monitor for moisture, just going to be wet all the time. And so we always have these conditions where diseases are going to occur. I tried to think of a way to show you the scale of these things. That 4-lane highway you see going across that slide, that's a hair off of my old gray head. And what you see all around it is the spores of the bitter rot fungus that is a really common fruit rot on muscadine grapes. And so those little teeny tiny things are much smaller than hair diameter. They're part of the dust and molds that we breathe every day. They're just out there in the millions and too small to see. But that's the propagule. That's how this fungus spreads from one part of your vine to another part. That's how it gets to the grape. With that spore lands on a grape, there's moisture there for a long enough period of time, say 12 hours or so. It germinates, infects the fruit, and you have disease develop. So the way the fungus hangs around in your vineyard is right on the vine. So you'll see the old mummified fruit from previous years. The fruit pedicels on muscadines are very persistent. They're hard to prune out, and those are the points where this fungus stays in the vine. And so when you have new shoot growth like you see in this picture, or let me show another one. Yeah, so this time of the year when new shoots are coming out, those infected parts of the vine are releasing spores, splashing onto these leaves and flowers and fruit, and that's how the infection gets to the new tissue and develops into disease. So again, that informs us about when we need to spray for this problem. If you're going to try to control a fungal pathogen with fungicides, you have to get the fungicide out there before the fungus gets there. And so we're in a protective mode. Just another shot of the same sort of thing, some old mummies hanging in the fruit. Again, or in the vine, that's how this thing carries over. And just a few pictures of what these diseases look like. I make a distinction between signs and symptoms. A symptom would be, seeing a soft grape, a sign is an actual sign of the fungus itself, where you see mold on the berry and you say, okay, I see the fungus that's causing the problem. So if we look at some of these rot organisms, you see in your upper left corner there, the macrophoma rot, very often is just a symptom. You see this sort of eyeball-looking thing looking back at you. It's a rot on the grape, but you don't see the fungus itself. Right beside it there, you see bitter rot, the one that I showed in the picture with the hair in it. And that fungus is very profuse in sporulating. So the grape is covered with this black mold, and you say, aha, that's bitter rot on muscadines. So one of the most common and problematic fungi that we have is ripe rot. It's a species of Colototricum. And so what you'll see with that is brown spots on the fruit with orange or pinkish-looking spores. So this is a very, very photogenic rot out there in the field. If you see this in your grapes, you'll very often see it as hot spots on the vine where the fungus, this particular fungus has really sticky spores. They don't blow around a lot, but they get splashed a lot. And so you'll be going down the road picking grapes, and you'll hit a spot where every grape is rotten for 3 feet on the cordon. And that's where this ripe rot has exploded in the vine. As far as leaf diseases, again, they're mostly fungal pathogen, except for Pierce's disease, which we mentioned earlier as a bacterial problem. But what we're talking about today is mostly the fungal pathogens. One of the most common is black rot. And this is the first fungus that you'll see symptoms of in the season. Black rot is that leaf spot that shows up before you spray, and you say, oh, wow, I'm behind. I've got to go spray. This is one that in North Carolina we'll see symptoms beginning in late April or May, and it's one of the first fungi to show up in the field. Another pathogen I want to touch on briefly is powdery mildew. This is a really common pathogen on muscadines. If you look at it on bunch grapes, it's very showy on bunch grapes. It's very obvious on the leaves. On muscadines, it's easy to overlook. But what you wind up with a muscadine powdery mildew problem is scabby-looking grapes. And so usually when we get a phone call at the research station where I work and go out and look at grapes that have powdery mildew, we just see the damage from powdery mildew. We rarely actually see the pathogen itself. In muscadines, it's just you can see in that center grape there, that little small one, kind of a fuzzy appearance to it, but really hard to see with the naked eye. What you do see with muscadines is the damage. So this is powdery mildew scarring on the surface of fruit. You can see one grape there that's totally covered with scars, one that has just a small scabby area on it, and then one that's healthy. So this is your indication that you have a powdery mildew problem, really common on muscadines, really easy to overlook. It's something that occurs on muscadine vines that are not sprayed. Can be really severe to the point that it causes the fruit to split, and you have a lot of unmarketable fruit that never ripens. So that's your powdery mildew symptom. As far as management and control of these diseases, it's a lot simpler for muscadines than it is for bunch grapes. I do want to put in a plug, though, for something that has not happened yet, but I want to mention it, and that is tissue culture. We've got some muscadines in tissue culture at our lab at State. There's not a lot of demand for this plant material, but in other small fruits, it's become a really critical part of getting clean plants. And so strawberries, blueberries, caneberries, and I think someday muscadines, we're going to have to go to a tissue culture source of plant material. So just be aware that is something that is, I think, in the works, and down the road, I think we'll see more muscadines that are in tissue culture. The big holdup for tissue culture muscadines has mostly just been a lack of demand for vines. There's not a lot of production going in, so not a lot of push for TC plants. Can't talk about muscadines without talking about disease resistance, and this is what I started off talking about. They are resistant to a lot of diseases. So you get out of trouble with downy mildew, botrytis, a lot of different pathogens. with muscadines. We also have noticed in doing fungicide trials with muscadine grapes, we don't do fungicide trials on dark fruited muscadines because they're just so darn resistant to rot. So if you're planning on planting muscadines and you don't want to use fungicides, don't plant bronze varieties because you will need to spray them. You will have to use some fungicides, at least if you're producing for a fresh market where the fruit appearance is really, really critical. Let's see, down at the bottom, few visible virus problems. I'm not sure where I stand on that. The surveys that have been done, you do find some viruses in muscadines, but you can't, unlike other small fruits, you can't really walk up to the vine and say, oh, okay, that's virus. You know, they're mostly not symptomatic. So that remains to be seen whether it's a very big problem or not. Talk a little bit about fungicides, sprayers, spray timing. Really like to see a lot of water on muscadines. So with an air blast, 40 to 50 gallons, which is a lot for an air blast to the acre. If you're using a pressure sprayer that's not air assisted, I like to see 100 to 150 gallons of water to the acre. So that's a lot of filling up that tank. But what you're really after is coverage. And so with muscadines, if you don't get the coverage, you don't get the disease control. The spray type, I mean, I like the air blast sprayers, but we have some that we use in blueberries that are cannons that are sort of point down. And that's not what you want because that's just, you know, muscadines have such a curtain of foliage along the vine, you just don't hit the grapes at all with a cannon type. So I'd like to see an air blast like you see used in this picture where the air is blowing up so that you loft that canopy up and get up under it. As far as spray timing, again, before disease is visible. So North Carolina, reasonably, that's mid-May for us. Shoots are 6 to 10 inches in length, and again, they're protectants. You're using this fungicide based on what you saw last year, not on what you're seeing this year. As far as the fungicides, our old standards are to start off with a Mancozeb product and then use Nova or Rally or Captan every 2 weeks, mid-May through August. Where ripe rot is a problem, we've got a lot of different tools you can use, and I'll talk about that a little bit further on. This was a slide I put together, as you can see, many years ago, 2016, just comparing what Mizuho Nita had on his schedule in Virginia versus what we use on muscadines in North Carolina. So vinifera, he's got 2 sprays plus 11 plus 7 plus 4 plus 2 plus 2 plus 1 plus 1 plus 2 to 3 times of all these different activities, modes of action to control a lot of different diseases that muscadines just don't get. So when you get the Reader's Digest version over there on the right with muscadines, it's just, you know, maybe 5 or 6 sprays well timed is about all you need for disease control. As far as the newer fungicides, I've got some data that's getting a little older now, but I wanted to share that with you. Dr. Brannon and myself did some work looking at fungicides because we found out that a lot of the fungicides out there had never been tested on muscadines. We didn't know if they worked. We didn't know if they were safe. And so we did a series of experiments in 2020, 2021, funded by the Southern Region Small Fruit Consortium. And what we looked at was what we called our standards that we knew worked, the Captan, Rally, so forth, and then what we called new products that nobody had tried on muscadines. And so this is the 2 lists there of the things that we looked at. These were randomized, replicated trials. We sprayed 4 times in North Carolina and evaluated fruit rot and leaf spot disease incidence. And so if you look at the table, boy, it's really a lot of stuff to look at there. So what you're looking at across the top there is the percent of disease, and then down the left side is the relative fungicides, and then in the body of the table you're seeing all the numbers that we came up with for fruit rots and percent marketable. Too small to read, don't want you to try. So what I've done is highlighted everything that worked. And so the next slide, we were really pleased to see, you know, across the top there is untreated control. That stayed in gray. And then compared to that untreated control, just about every fungicide that we tested had some efficacy. We had really good results with this trial, really good response with percent marketable. And so our summary of that was this. If you go back and look at that list of things that we tried, the ones with the 3 stars beside the name significantly increased marketable yield on Carlos. And so we feel like what we established here was a whole new suite of fungicides that we can use. Now remember, muscadines don't have a lot of disease problems compared to bunch grapes. We don't need that many sprays. So what we have here is just this huge smorgasbord of fungicides that we can use for muscadine grapes that are efficacious. And so you really have a lot of fungicides to work with on muscadines. This is all summarized in the regional guide. This is the 2025 at smallfruits.org. And again, another complicated table, but if you know what disease problem you have and you look at this table in the guide, you can see which fungicides work best for it. And if you want to look at something that Dr. Brandon came up with, which is the seasonal at-a-glance spray schedule, again, it's just this hugely populated table of lots of different fungicides that you can use. So, my advice to you is to look at this list, keep some of the tried and true products. If you have things that, disease problems that are breaking through, talk to me, talk to Dr. Brandon. We can tweak your disease control so that we can manage the diseases that you have, based on a good diagnosis. One thing I will say about the fungicides is the list really gets short towards the end when you get close to harvest. But I also want to say that's not when your fungicides are doing you the most good. If you look in that red circle, can be used up to 7 days pre-harvest. We're down to Topsin, Procure, Switch, and Captan, and all the other fungicides have a longer pre-harvest interval. So the other thing I'd say about Captan is if you use it then, you're going to leave a residue on the fruit. And so that's not desirable either. So really the early sprays are the money sprays for you. I really want you to concentrate on controlling muscadine diseases before you see them based on what you saw the previous year. So again, they're resistant to disease, spray early, and use enough water for good coverage. And when I see failure to control disease, it's because folks waited until they saw disease or they weren't using enough water to get good coverage. So that's the take-home message there. If you have muscadines, you know that you have sort of a honeymoon for the first few years before the diseases move in and become a chronic problem in the vineyard. Once that happens, keep an eye on what you had last year and spray for it the next season. And that's all I've got, Sarah. Any questions or comments? Anything I missed? Phil? Okay. Hey, Walker. Yes, sir.
Botchysferia, cankers on cordons and trunks.
Oh boy, that's just a pruning deal. I mean, you just have to prune those out when you see them, and they're usually till you can't see it, till it's clean and green all the way across, till there's no discolored wood at all, and then a little more. So typically, what you'll see with Botchysferia cankers, at least in a vineyard that I trained, I make the mistake of wrapping the cordon around the wire when I'm training the vine. And what that does is the wire cuts into the cordon and creates a dead spiral through that cordon. And that gets colonized by Botchysferia and other fungi in that group. And then you have the arm die on that vine. So my first lesson that I learned there was don't wrap the vine around the wire when you're training it when it's a new vine. And the next lesson was the only way to get rid of that, once that cordon starts to go down, is to cut it all the way off back to the main trunk and regrow a new cordon, which is not fun to do. But have you seen a lot of dieback or a lot of Botchysferia? Cold injury. Yeah, that's another big trigger for Botchysferia. Yeah. And so any kind of wound, Botchysferia is a wound pathogen. And so any kind of wound followed by plant stress is going to exhibit Botchysferia. Like out west where they have all these different woody plant species, they don't see symptoms until they get into a drought system, in the chaparral parts of the country. And then when they get under drought stress, everything gets stem-like. They all come down with this same fungal disease. So it's not that the pathogen's not aggressive. It's just it's waiting for that plant to be a little weak. And so, yeah, the cold injury is a big entry point for Botrysphaeria, for sure. Yeah, and yeah, any sort of injury. The other thing that takes our vines out at the Castlehane Research Station where I work is grapefruit borer. That's a whole nother thing there, a whole nother problem. But that's our other big problem in the vineyard that shortens the life. Yeah.
Aerial roots, your comment?
Aerial roots, I think, are an indicator of a problem lower down, usually grapefruit borer. I think it's a stress response from the plant. You see this curtain of aerial roots hanging down from the cordon. I think you can say something's going on further down on that vine. And if it's that old of a vine, it's going to have grapefruit borer. Yeah, they're just everywhere. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Hey, Bill. Angular leaf spot. We still looking mostly at rally.
Yes. So angular leaf spot on grape. Rally is a good fungicide for it. But let's see if I can back up here. Let's see what else we hit. Wow, just about everything on the list, Bruce, is good, very good, or excellent. So all these fungicides are going to be go-tos, I think. Yeah, it's not hard to control. Yeah. Okay.
Awesome.
All right. Very good. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Bill, for that. All right, so we are going to switch it up and talk to Carmen Johns about some of the new cultivar releases out of Arkansas.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you everyone for staying until the end of the conference, making the ferry trip over on the last day. My name is Carmen Johns, and I've been working with the University of Arkansas's fruit breeding program for a little over 8 years now. I'm the assistant fruit breeder, so I work under the direction of Dr. Margaret Worthington, and we have released our first 2 varieties of muscadines out of our breeding program. I'm excited to share with you guys a little bit of information. So we're going to start out talking a little bit about the history of the University of Arkansas program briefly, and then we'll get into some details about the varieties that we have. So the fruit breeding program was started in 1964 by Dr. Jim Moore. And we've worked on a ton of different crops, but currently we have active breeding programs in blackberry grape, which is Vitis vinifera, Vitis labrusca, and hybrids between the 2 of those. Peach and nectarine, which we're starting to wind down. We have quit making crosses, but we're still seeing through some evaluations on selections. And then finally, muscadine. So it's a legacy breeding program, which is kind of unique because the private sector is sort of creeping in on breeding programs, and everybody wants something proprietary and special, and you pay to get in a club, and we're pretty proud to still be around and still have public varieties that are coming out for the growers in the Southeast. So with grapes at the University of Arkansas, we started out working specifically on Vitis. And what I mean by that is these are table grapes that you see that are usually now produced in California. Dr. Moore's vision with this was that he was going to try to breed something that would work well in the Southeast. And as Dr. Klein mentioned, it's not easy to grow grapes down here. There's a lot of things that are challenges with our humidity, and we have a ton of rain. We have insect problems. About every disease possible exists in most of our growing regions. And then you also have the winter injury, which is a problem on muscadines, but less so. So the solution that Dr. Clark came up with, since we have all these challenges with table grapes, was to go back to the original southeastern table grape, so muscadines. So we started crossing in 2005. So just about 20 years ago, we started working on these, and we finally have some new releases. When we started breeding, the top objectives were to come out with things that had a really nice flavor. Improved texture is vital because we're wanting to see these become something that's widely accepted outside of the Southeast so that the Southeasterners can sell them to people. We're working really hard right now on seedlessness, and that's a work in progress. Dr. Renee Threlfall is going to talk a little bit more about that later. So what we've released is not seedless, they're seeded. We're also working with dry scar, and what I mean by that is whenever you pick the fruit, it comes off clean. It doesn't have a tear in it. That's really important for fresh market, really important for post-harvest. And we think that there's some application with that that can maybe bleed into what blueberry growers are already using with their equipment, if we can get this dialed in. So we're working hard for that and selecting hard on it. We also are, of course, looking always for healthy plants and plants in improved cold hardiness, and looking to expand the industry so that we have more growers and we can establish an industry that more than people that live in North Carolina and on the eastern seaboard are aware of muscadines. So many Americans, and even in Arkansas, don't know about muscadines. They don't know what they are. They don't know how good they are. Even I didn't have a muscadine until I was 32, and I'm from Northwest Arkansas. So we're breeding kind of at the northern edge of where you're able to grow muscadines, and that has been an effective strategy for us for selecting things that have improved cold hardiness. So what I'm showing here is Lane's 1997 native region of muscadines. The red star on this map is in sort of central Arkansas, and that's where our breeding location is. You can see that it's right on the line of where you'll find them out in the woods. And you can also see that this really correlates closely with the cold hardiness zones. I think that this is the 2023 cold hardiness zone, so it's shifted around a little bit. It used to be able to almost overlap them, but since we're getting a little bit warmer, they look a little bit off. But these other green stars on the map on the left are the other breeding programs that exist. So you can see those are all pretty well nested into the range where they're found naturally. So because of this, like being in the transition zone, we're able to select, and we have like these insane cold events that kill most of the things in the vineyard, and that's probably a bad thing if you're a grower, but for our breeding program, it gives us a really clear picture of things that have improved cold hardiness. So the first one that I want to introduce is Mighty Fine. So Mighty Fine, I believe the name was mentioned at this meeting to Margaret Worthington a couple years ago, and she ran with it. So if that was you, thank you. So this is a really nice plant. It has balanced vigor, exceptional health. It maintains a healthy canopy through ripening. It's been a step forward for cold hardiness. So 2021 was our most notable screening event for hardiness. We got down to -15 Fahrenheit actual temperatures. We had sustained cold temperatures that were below zero for about 5 days. Is that right, Parker? Something like that. And so these plants survived and they were still productive after that event. We had some dieback, of course, and we had some bud injury, but they lived. Whereas we retrained about 95% of our material in our program. So it was a little bit of a setback, but a good screening for cold hardiness. These plants also have leaves and fruit with very little rot that shows up on them with just a spray program similar to what Dr. Klein described. You know, it's pretty minimal input compared to table grapes. And this variety is early ripening, so it's about 7 to 10 days earlier than Supreme, and it's perfect flowered, of course. So the intended use for this variety is for the fresh market. Mighty Fine is, like I said, seeded, it's black, and it has improved texture. So it has pretty tender and edible skins. You can actually chew the skins up, and it's not an offensive experience where you're chewing on boot leather. It's pretty large in Arkansas. It's about 11 grams on average. We did do a trial in Alabama, and I'll show some of that data here in a second. It was a bit smaller in Alabama. It has an excellent flavor. I describe it as being something floral. Classic muscadine aromatics, very sweet is one of the big draws of it. So usually it averages about 20 degrees Brix in Arkansas. It has a dry stem scar and about 75% of the fruit, so acceptable for post-harvest. And then we did this year, or in 2025, it's weird that's 2026 now, we did a trial with the University of Florida, and these are preliminary results. We're gonna do a few more years of this. So we had 130 panelists that tested 20 different cultivars, just seeing their liking of the fruit. And the customers evaluated overall liking, texture, sweetness, flavor, and then purchase intent, so whether they would buy them or not. And the Mighty Fine was ranked first for overall liking, flavor, purchase intent, and it was in the top 5 for skin texture, flesh texture, and sweetness. And so these also, in this panel, included some of the new seedless material out of the Bloodworth program. There was a wide variation in what was there. We also threw Carlos in there so people could see how bad it could really be. And then Mighty Fine was in the top statistical group for almost all the traits. Ooh, Renee, Paul was. Yeah, to give you a fair comparison, like Pog versus Mighty Fine has thinner skin. It really does, and it's about the same season as Pog. So we did a yield trial with oh, yes, sir.
Well, I'm in southeastern North Carolina. Hawk is a little later than Supreme for us. How would it compare to the lane as far as the early black?
You know, our lane vines, they're in the process of being retrained, and I have not seen them fruit yet, so I can't honestly say. They looked like they survived last summer, or last winter, so we should be able to see fruit on them this year. But let me get your contact information, and I can get you in touch with Margaret. She'll know a little bit more about that. So I've been in Blackberry, and I've been learning about muscadines for the last 3 years, and I'm still learning. So we did a yield trial with Elena Caneva at Auburn, and this trial was conducted in Clanton, Alabama, and I'm just presenting some of the results of what we saw. You'll see on this table that the yield was on average about 18.3 kilograms, so 40 pounds per vine is what we saw. It's fairly lower than Ruby Crisp, but I was talking to Dr. Worthington about this and how to kind of frame this information. And Ruby Crisp it's a nice plant. It has really beautiful fruit. It also seems like it might overcrop in Arkansas, and I don't know if that's true in Alabama too, but Mighty Fine is consistent year to year. You'll see the third year that it's in the ground in Arkansas, it'll produce about 8 kilos, and then it's close to 20 every year after that. And so what it brings to the table is that it's consistent and it's sweeter. So you can see it wasn't statistically significantly sweeter, but 17 versus 16 bricks is notable for an eating experience. And then it had substantially higher amounts of dry scar, so 91% dry scar on Mighty Fine in Alabama versus 79% on Ruby Crisp. So again, really important if you're doing fresh market sales and need post-harvest, need some shelf life out of it. So the next one we're going to talk about is called Altus. Altus is named after a little town that is in Arkansas, about 40 minutes away from our research station, where they did a lot of preliminary trialing of this variety. And they grow a lot of Noble, because that's, the flagship processing variety that's in Arkansas. And they really liked this, and they gave us some really nice data from it. So we named it in honor of the Post family. And this is another vine that has excellent vigor, balanced. It has similar cold hardiness to Mighty Fine, which runs with Carlos. It survived the 2021 Arctic vortex. This variety maintains the canopy through ripening, so you can see in this picture that's September 9th, so that's about its peak, and it still looks nice and healthy with a minimal spray program and fairly low fertilizer inputs at our site. So it ripens in the same season as Mighty Fine, and it's also perfect flowered. So here's a picture of our fruit. It's a little bit smaller than Mighty Fine, about half the size actually, but it's larger than Noble. So Noble at our site's about 3.5 grams, and this runs more like 6. So I think that you could actually use it for some fair overlap with the fresh market if you wanted to sell it. It has the thicker, more traditional skins and the kind of gummy flesh texture that you'd expect out of a traditional muscadine. So if you have a market for that and people like that fresh, this will work for it. It has really nice juicy meat in the gummy flesh, so it's great for processing. And we also had this in that yield trial with Elena Caneva at Alabama, and it had similar results. About 40 pounds per vine is what you'll expect to see every year. And it has lower bricks, but it's actually nice for processing. Renee might be able to tell us a little bit more about that if we have some time. She's here in this room. She's our food scientist at the University of Arkansas that's done a lot of work with the processing on this variety. And so Renee's lab did a test with the juice and wine off of Altus versus Noble. And she's going to hand out some samples of the Altus juice. And so she did, is that the cold or the hot? Renee? Different, okay. Okay, from our 2025 harvest, she's handing out right now. So this experiment that we did is not related to this, but she tested out 4 different treatments. So we did Noble cold press, Noble hot press, and then Altus hot and cold press. There were 66 panelists that evaluated the juice for overall impression, color, aroma, flavor, sweetness, and sourness. And by a substantial amount, the Altus hot press was the preferred juice. What do you guys think? This has been good. Very muscular.
The harvest. And so it's not a complete cold press. So a cold press is when you don't add any heat at all to the process. A hot press, and a hot press would look like that. So this is, you added a little bit of heat, but not very much. I mean, you would just got up to warm it to get the color to release from the skin. Sorry.
Is that the cold press?
No, thank you.
This is more of a cold press that we were drinking.
Like minimal heat is, I think, what she was. So for the folks at the recording, she was talking about how this is the flavor that they're trying or the juice they're trying right now. Had minimal heat application. So you can see on the left are the ones that had heat. That's the hot press. There's a little bit more color that pulls through with it. And then the cold press is on the right. Margaret's kids love, love, love the cold press, mostly because it's pink. She has 3 girls, all girly girls. So a good product for kiddos.
Yeah, the difference between a hot and cold will be, you'll have more light and delicate flavors and aromas in a cold than a hard press.
So a cold press has more light and delicate flavors than a hot press. Hot press a little bit more forward. And then lastly, Renee did some work also with wines. And so she did a skin contact treatment on the wines. And they did Altus and Noble at 0 days and Altus and Noble at 3 days. And by a long shot, 59% of the panelists that tried this liked the Altus at 0 skin contact. So it creates a nice product for processing beyond juice and wine. You could use it for jams, you can make pies. And then as far as where to purchase these plants, you can purchase Altus and Mighty Fine through a few licensed propagators. I know Greg Ison's back there. He had some plants that were for sale. I think might be getting close to sold out for the year, perhaps. And then we got Bottoms Nursery, Philotech, and Greenleaf also are going to have plants coming up for sale. And so Dr. Klein was mentioning that tissue culture plants might become sort of important with this, but it's a way that people haven't typically bought or like planted plants. So it's something that there needs to be some pioneers that make this happen. And there are clean plants that are available of this. So if you're interested, get a hold of us. Dr. Parker Cole's in here too. He's about to jet off to catch a flight, but you can email agritco@uada.edu if you have any questions, or certainly feel free to reach out to myself or Margaret if you want any more information on this. I don't know if this presentation is going to be available, but there are links on here for the YouTube videos for these varieties. So every time we release a new fruit variety, we do YouTube videos to do a description of them. And John composes some beautiful music for us still. So with that, if y'all have any questions, let me know. I'm going to let Renee take that. So the question is about the hot and cold press treatments on the juice. I know about genetics.
So the reason is commercially, a lot of our industry actually do a hot press technique to extract more color, because in the lighter, but also when you do more color, you do get some more of the more intense flavor compounds. So that really can, so it's a really kind of a balance between the two, which is why, like when I have limited amount of fruit, I do kind of more of a mostly cold, but I still want better juice production yield, which you're going to get in a hot press for sure. So you're going to get more yield, but you will pay a price with a bit more extraction of more of the tannins and the flavor compounds. So it's a little bit of a balancing game. But I say for commercial production, they kind of do a little bit of some heat process, usually using a heat exchanger of some kind, probably usually even sometimes between the crush and the press.
Is it about wine or juice?
Yeah, soluble solid sugar. And one report
Yeah, so at the University of Arkansas's trials and whenever we did this testing in Clarksville, we had 11 years worth of data and it averaged out to be 20%. In Alabama, at their trial, it was like 17. So I think there might be some variation in how the plants were managed. But 11 years of data is pretty substantial. I would say 20.
No, when we harvest, typically in our studies, we're harvesting for majority ripeness. So we wouldn't be harvesting everything on the same time schedule. So we wouldn't be harvesting unripe with ripe. Is that your question? Yeah. No.
Okay, yeah, we're going through the field twice a week looking at percentage of ripeness, and usually we'll say whenever it hits like 40 to 50%, that's when we're calling it like a peak ripeness. So 7 to 10 days earlier versus Supreme in that way. Okay, so dry scar, our 11 years worth of data, 75%. In the Alabama trial, they had 90% dry scar. Yeah, probably our version of like a dry scar is a little bit more stringent perhaps than what was used in the Alabama trial. So that might account for some of the difference. Because we say if it has even a little bit of moisture that's visible, we're not counting it. If its abscission layer is not, dry. I can't speak to that. We didn't look at it like that. We're going to have an article that's going to come out in the Journal of American Society of Horticultural Sciences, and that's going to break down the comparisons with Supreme.
And we'll also have fact sheets available on these pretty soon.
Yes, I left them in my luggage at the hotel today. I apologize. We go through them about 3 times if we're going to pull every fruit off of the vine. And still, even after that, we'll have some of that indeterminate flowering that you see where it'll be like 3 weeks later. But it's a really like an unsubstantial amount of the fruit. Yeah. So it's a pretty quick season.
All right. Thank you so much, Carmen. Oh, careful with the cord. All right. So for this next session, we do have a small break if you need to use the restrooms. It's just out that direction of the room. Also, if you have not scanned, it was not quite on when we started the session, but the scanner for your badge is in the back if you need it. Again, South Carolina, if you need your credits, please scan the separate sheet over there. Holler if you have any questions. And we have one more juice also for you to sample, which we also would request. There's a small survey, a very short survey that goes along with it to scan it. Do you want to give a brief?
Yeah, so during my talk,
All right, so next we have Dr. Renee Threffel, who I've been very excited to be working with much more on this project that she's about to give a little bit more information on the Vitis muscadinia project. So take it away, Renee.
Okay. This up a little higher. All right. Happy Saturday afternoon. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about this project. You got to come back there and take the juice. And if you're just coming in, there's a survey associated with the juice, and you can take the survey while you take the juice. So I'm Dr. Renee Threffel. I am in the food science department. I've been doing grape and wine research for over 30 years, and it kind of hurts to say that, doesn't it? Don't want to ask how many people in the room are under that age, but under 30 years. But so this is just a little bit about like thinking about what is in the future for an industry, a grape and wine industry in the United States. So I'll go through these. I have a lot of slides. Sarah probably thought, why are there so many slides? But I'm going to go through them fast. I knew that Bill was talking before me, but he did a great job of talking about like the disease resistance that we have in muscadine and why it's important. For us, we have Vitis, which is all of your Cabernet Sauvignon, your Merlot. That's the majority of what is grown in the world. But we also have a genre of grapes called Muscadinia, which I know a lot of you are familiar with. How many growers do I have in the room? How many grape growers? Yeah. All right. Okay, good. And so the Vitis is the backbone of the industry. And whereas we know that Muscadinia, as Carmen talked about, only grow mostly in the southeast section of the United States. Look, Carmen and I have the same map in our presentations. And on the muscadine side, we have fresh market. We have processing, we have variable berry size, thicker skins. In terms of a fresh market grape, not the best because you have seeds in most of the cultivars. You have thicker skins. When Dr. Worthington, our fruit breeder, gives this presentation, she says it's like a backdoor fruit, a back porch fruit, where you sit on there and you're chewing it, and then you're spitting out the parts that you don't want to swallow, and that, you know, it's hard to eat and hard to kind of get people outside of the South to understand why anyone would love a muscadine, besides that they're fantastic flavor. So Carmen went over a lot about the breeding program, and there are breeding programs not just at Arkansas but at other universities around muscadine. And really the drive on muscadine breeding is to get rid of the seeds but keep that flavor and improve that texture on the fresh market side. On the processing side, the anthocyanins, or the color compounds that are majority in a muscadine, are not very stable. They'll tend to go from that light pink color to an orange color very quickly because they're different pigments. So they have different stability than our typical Vitis vinifera. Now, when we talk about building connections between these two genera, the Vitis vinifera versus the Muscadinia, it's not a very simple process. What we're trying to do is to take these things that are on the Muscadinia side, the disease resistant, the interesting flavor, and to breed that over into vinifera. But vinifera's got some cool stuff that we like, that we might like to see in Muscadinia: the thinner skins, the abscission of the fruit from the plant, even ripening, and then but you know, the vinifera do struggle, particularly in the southeast, with, you know, the number of sprays and the disease that is present in the vinifera. So we have things going back and forth both ways. It's not just we're going to take this and improve vinifera. We're actually going the other way as well. I do like this quote that's like from the 1950s. Of all the wild grapes, the species Muscadinia possesses the most remarkable combination of desirable characters to counterbalance the deficiencies of Vitis vinifera grapes. You know, so that's over what almost 75 years ago. This quote, and thinking about that. Now, why hasn't this been done? This breeding of the two been done? They have a different number of chromosomes. We have 38 in the vinifera and 40 in the Muscadinia. So if Margaret were here, the fruit breeder, she'd say it's like crossing a horse with a donkey, and you get a bunch of mules, the sterile mules. So you have to do a lot of back crossing. Are there any fruit breeders in this audience? Thank God. So I could just say whatever and you'll believe me. But basically, it's a tough job. It takes a lot of time, and it's not easy to do. Otherwise, it would already have been done already. So we have a strong push while this breeding effort is, and our focus of this project is the U.S. industry. This has already been going on for decades. And what we have now is we have already got the stenoscarpic seedlessness successfully into the vinifera, from the vinifera into the muscadine through classical breeding efforts. Now, this is important to think about, because what I'm talking about in this whole project is it's classical breeding. We're not doing genetically modified, even though when I start talking, I'm going to talk about genes, but we're doing marker selection. And I'll explain that more in a second. But Jeff Bloodworth is a private breeder. And he is in North Carolina. He works with Gardens Alive or Wow Grapes, and they have released actually 3 now: Razzmatazz, Oh My, and then a new one, but I don't know the name of it. Oh yes. Oh, yes. So that's the newest cultivar. I need to update that slide. But it's also some of this has been done in Europe, mainly on the vinifera side, where they have integrated the Muscadinia disease resistance a little bit into some of the cultivars that are important in the industry. So one of the things that we're looking at particularly is something that has to do with the powdery mildew resistance loci of run 1. So powdery mildew resistance gene has been identified, and we're looking to kind of incorporate some of this disease resistance over into vinifera. So I have been coming to this meeting for a long, I'm not always here, but I've been working with the muscadine industry for a long time, 20 years. And when Irvin Lineberger was alive, he always wanted to have a joint project, and we tried for years and years to get federal funding, more than just state funding, more than just regional funding, to address these issues on muscadine. I wish you were here today to see this, but we were able to achieve that through a large grant and a large team. And this didn't come overnight. This team we've been working on for a few years to develop the team, wait for the right people to come along, and the excitement of the industry. So we submitted this called Through the Grapevine, Developing Vitis by Muscadini Wide Hybrids for Enhanced Disease Resistance and Quality. It's a 32-person team from 12 institutions, including the University of Georgia. I know we got a lot of people here, and North Carolina, we got some North Carolina people here. It's a $7.1 million project. Now, before you have a heart attack, that is a lot of money, but also, this is a 32-person team from 14 institutions. Divide up all that by 4 years. You know, we all have some money to do this and make it work. But this really is about kind of improving things for the U.S. industry. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that project, and that's really what I'm here to do today. I'm the lead of the project along with Dr. Margaret Worthington, and we also lead some of our objectives. But this is my main project team, and we have 6 main objectives. Really one of the things that when we submitted the project, I tell this story, submit the project, you wait to hear from the entities of whether you get it or not. And if you get an email, that's bad news. But if you get a phone call, get an email to schedule a phone call, it's better news. I knew a phone call was coming. I was at an AACV meeting in a national meeting, and when I got the call, getting out of a taxi, and so I waited for the phone call, and the phone call came. Now, the phone call can be like, yeah, we're going to fund you, but you got to reduce your budget, and you got to do basically a month's worth of work to figure it out, get that to work. I got the phone call from the head of from the USDA for this particular grant, and he said, well, I want to congratulate you. You've been funded. And then I waited for the but, because I was like, oh gosh, what am I going to have to do for this thing? But I wanted to let you know that you were the highest ranked proposal of the entire set. So they had over 130 proposals submitted. They only funded 17, and we were ranked number 1. So that was really great for our team. But what we did, we really had a good story. We showed our there's never really been formal collaborations between Muscadinia research and Vitis vinifera research, and our project was really stakeholder driven. We had a lot of good letters, and I know there's a lot of people in this audience that probably wrote letters for us. So our team, not only that, had a good beginning to end. So we're only in year 1. We've only completed year 1. So our project starts with the genetics by Chi Sun is leading that effort out of Cornell. Then the breeding led by Margaret Worthington. Pathology, that's kind of plant diseases. I know Phil and Bill are both on that team. That's a pathology led by Lance Cladle-Davison at USDA. Then we get into quality, like what kind of quality attributes are we looking at harvest, and into post-harvest storage. I lead that effort. Then Melinda Knuth at North Carolina is leading a marketing effort. And then we go on into the production, working with the growers and the extension agents, and that's being led by Mark Hoffman at North Carolina State University. And so we did mention, Sarah mentioned earlier in the session that we are having, I think it's at the last session of the day, is we want to meet with growers and talk about things that would maybe just your concerns, anything about the industry and maybe this project or your vision for the future of your vineyards. And you're going to get a $100 gift card if you participate. So if you could just stay with us, that'll be great. And I'm excited to see, and Katie's going to lead that. We really, this crazy graphic shows like how all the teams work together and overlap. And then we also have a really great advisory board. And so we have, when you get a grant like this, it's almost like running a business, honestly, for 4 years. Like I got a website, I got I'm a manager. I'm basically a manager now. I still do research, I still do teaching, I still have students, but I do manage this grant more on that side. So this is the genetics team. I'm not going to go into detail very much on the genetics and breeding part, particularly since there's no breeders in here. But what we're trying to do is we're doing breeding, but we're using genetics to speed up the pipeline. So what we want to do is, like, if we can find the gene that has something to do with powder resistance, disease resistance, we know where that gene. When a breeder crosses a plant, they get 100 seedlings. Now, typically, you let those 100 seedlings grow, and in 2 to 3 years, you see fruit, and you see if that plant lives. So you're evaluating that crop for years. If we're just looking at either seedlessness or powdery mildew resistance, we can say, of those 100 plants, okay, 5 of them are something we want to look at, but we don't have to look at. And you can imagine the cost of looking at all those plants for years. And then we can really speed up the pipeline on that using the genetic assisted breeding. Yeah, and a typical, like, unlike like blackberry breeding, which you're growing a plant, you're having really fruit in the first year or so. Grapes are very different. You're growing a plant, you're growing the plant for 2 to 3 years before you even see fruit, and then then you're really not seeing anything very much. I got to go much faster, but that's okay. So what they're really doing on the genetic side is looking at these markers, and they're actually working a lot with the breeding team to do all that, but really like using painting tools to figure out, like, where are all the genes, because it's not exactly the same as the tools are not the same they are for vinifera, but there's nothing for muscadine. So that's what we're doing there. I'm not going to go through all this. Pathology team, we're really focusing on that powdery mildew resistance, black rot, and then also looking at mealybug vectors. So we have a whole team working on those. And then the quality team, you did the juice survey, so we're looking at flavor compounds, and that goes back to genes as well. If there is a flavor compound that people either hate or love, we want to know where it is, because we can look for the gene for it eventually when we know where it is. We're also doing fresh market stuff. Carmen presented some of the things we're doing there, where we're doing that for 2 years. We're going to have probably done 80 different selections of Muscadinia and Vitis by Muscadinia crosses. And then we're going to have a whole bunch of flavor studies as well that we're working with that. So you guys did the muscadine juice tasting. So thank you, please. And if you'd like to take a jar home to do more later, let me know. And that's just some of the things that I've been doing. And then the marketing team, I already talked about one thing we're doing. But if we're going to be creating new products, we got to figure out how we're going to sell them. And particularly on, also focusing on the fresh market side. What are we looking for in consumers outside of North Carolina or Georgia? If you see this on a shelf, what are you looking for, and how are we going to market it? Are we going to market it as a muscadine? Are we going to market it as a grape? Are we going to call it a specialty berry? And so that's some of the things. So focus groups and looking at different ways of packaging. What will a consumer perceive in terms of that? And I really, the production team is doing a lot of cool stuff, but they're going to be really working with the growers. So over the next 2 years, their role really increases in the last 2 years of the project. We've already established some field trials, so you'll be able to be invited to come see some replicated field trials that we have at different places. I know we've got some in Georgia, but we also have demo trials at commercial growers, where we're just looking at how things grow, but not necessarily as scientifically. And then there'll be outreach materials, of course, that are a part of that. But I did want to show the locations. So these are the locations of our replicated trials. We are stretching that limit up into Kentucky to kind of see. We actually do, not part of this project, we have some going on in Missouri as well. So we're trying to see where that cold hardiness line can be increased. But these are some of our partners, and this is just the team. But I'd be glad to, if I have time, answer questions. But if not, I'll stay around for that grower panel, and I'll answer those questions then too. Thank you. Yeah, and in fact, like we didn't talk a lot about Pierce's disease when we started this project, but then it became apparent that we added it to our production group as some of the things we're definitely looking at when we're evaluating our plants that are growing, because Bill gave a really good talk at ASCB Eastern Section meeting about the change in the zones for Pierce's disease have changed over the last 20 years. So we know that the zones are changing and it is becoming where you didn't have Pierce's disease, now you do. So it is definitely something we're looking at. Yeah. But this is happening now, and this is for the future. So, you're not going to see plants available right this second, but I would say in the next 5 years, we are going to have more seedless muscadines and more seedless opportunities in the United States. Well, email us and let us know what that was, because I'd like to. All right. All right. It would be helpful to know. So just get with Sarah and let her know what cultivar that was, because I'd like to tell the genetics team as well. Any other questions? Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Renee. Next, we will have Dr. Thompson-Wittrick talking about ethanol reduction in wine production. So for those of you that work with the processing to make some of the wine production, we'll get some of those details now. So that should work too.
I promise I'm standing. And this is in heels. So usually I tell students I don't need a mic, but because you're recording, I'm going to end up using the mic. So I recognize and acknowledge this is going to be more of a technical for those post-production type of processing techniques. So it's not really meant for fresh crop. This is going for what you want to do if you're interested in actually producing a wine product. So I should introduce, this is ethanol reduction techniques on the impact of muscadine wine. Why am I looking at ethanol reduction? Well, I'm sure we've all heard or seen when you go out into the marketplace nowadays, we're seeing an increase in what we call no-low products. I will be using that acronym throughout the rest of the presentation, but no-low is referring to no and/or low alcohol. So just so you're aware of what that acronym is, and if you need me to repeat it, I'm happy to. We are seeing an increase in no-low products due to the increase in what we call health and wellness sector. We're seeing a lot of it, as well as what people call sober curiosity. Has anyone heard of dry January? Okay, basically what that means for those of us who don't follow it, I will wholeheartedly admit that. It is basically where you are trying to go the entire month of January without consuming a drop of ethanol. Now, that's very possible nowadays because the overall ethanol or no-low sector has exploded. We're no longer restricted to basically, was it Pabst? No, O'Doul's. You can now find Heineken, which is, if you've ever done a cross-representation of taken Heineken, I call full bore, which is what our 5% would be, to the NA product. It is very difficult to tell the difference, and that is due to a lot of the techniques that we've now come up with. We are actually looking at the increase of the no-low wine sector. It is exploding. It is currently a billion-dollar industry and expected to continue to increase in overall market value, mostly associated to, again, not to younger generations, predominantly Gen Z is kind of pushing this overall market sector. Now, for those who may or not be aware of kind of how the TTB, so that is the Taxation and Trade Bureau, falls under the ATF or alcohol and tobacco, or not ATF, alcohol and tobacco sector. They label wine. So table wine is what I call what you're generally going to get at at a nice restaurant. It falls within anywhere of 7 to about 14% ABV or alcohol by volume. Then you have the low alcohol sector, which is less than that. That's going to be from 7 to about 0.5%. And then you have the NA product, which is it must contain less than 0.5. If it's not, it falls into the low alcohol sector, and it doesn't matter if it's 0.6 or not. It is still considered a no-low product because it doesn't fall in that NA category. Now, the reduction techniques have really been used a lot predominantly in the beer sector. I will admit I am also a brewer, and this is where I know most of these from. So utilizing them now or shifting them into the wine sector is kind of it's not a new thing, but it's just not commonly utilized because people, when they consume wine, they are looking again for the ethanol that is present. But most of the techniques that we are commonly using for the production of no-low products are non-traditional wine yeast. Mostly the common one that is being used or suggested is Saccharomyces Luigi. There are others, as I said, but again, Mycodes is what's predominantly being done. Vacuum distillation, which we will talk about, this is actually an image of we have a rather large industrial size vacuum distillation unit at the University of Florida, and that's what you're seeing here. And we also do cold contact, or what you will be referring to as stopped fermentation. In this project is another technique that we can use because, again, the definition in the beer industry to be called beer is it must come in contact with yeast. Doesn't tell me how long it has to come in contact with yeast, but must come in contact with yeast. So that's kind of another tradition or another way we can produce a no-low product. The objectives of this overall experiment was we wanted to look at how these no-low techniques can impact, again, muscadine wine. We, again, are trying to enhance the viability and the consumer acceptability of, again, muscadine in general, but with younger generations kind of heading towards that no-low sector, we wanted to kind of combine both aspects of it. But what am I going to look at if I'm going to do this? The biggest thing that we wanted to look at was the volatile profile. Kind of, what does it smell like? Because again, the person, when you're enjoying wine, the first thing you oftentimes do, or again, a sommelier will do, is hand you that glass and they expect you to smell it. So that aromatic profile of a no-low product needs to be acceptable to the consumer. Otherwise, they are going to put it down and walk away. And again, we want repeat purchasing of these products. And the next thing we wanted to look at was consumer liking. So does these different methods have will they change the overall liking of the product? So we did, again, a consumer testing of this. And then we did an overall consumer ranking of it, which we'll go into. We looked at the feasibility of each of the methods for the industry, but again, it's easier to talk about those recommendations individually because, again, it is dependent upon your overall winery or whatever, or your brewery, whatever it is. It's easier to have a one-on-one conversation than give you generalized ideas because, again, each person is individual. So some of the methods we looked at, we modeled the kinetics. So again, we looked at the fermentation parameters. We knew they would be different based on, again, time and temperature of some of the things we were going to be doing. Total acidity, pH, color. We did look at calculated ethanol because, again, if we're going to call this a no-low product, we need to be able to accurately determine what the ethanol is. Volatile composition. We also did sensory, and then we ran stats. Due to the time frame of this actual presentation, I'm only going to focus on the ethanol production, the VOC, and the sensory. However, if there is something that you would like to see, I probably have the data on this computer and can easily show it to you. So when it came to the fermentation, we ended up using a blend of different muscadine grapes. I understand you want us to do a single variety, but we had leftover grapes that were coming from both bronze and black cultivars, and we decided to make a happy mixture of it. In order to obtain the juice, we used a 25-liter bladder press to juice these, and we separated them out into 2-liter fermentation vessels. This was all done in triplicate, so we actually had, again, 12 fermentations going on at one time, and we did this at roughly 19 C. In order to pitch this, we just followed the manufacturer's recommendations on it, and that's what we did for that one. And when it came to the treatments, we ran a control. We wanted to see with no restrictions, if you wanted to make a true fermentation or muscadine wine, what will the final product be? So we could then compare it to stopped, non-sack, and vacuum distillation. For the ethanol production, we used Kataya's equation. Again, very boring for me to go through this. It really was meant for us to determine what the ethanol concentration is, which, to be honest, we can tell you here. I know this is a very busy table and can be somewhat overwhelming, but what it really gives us is it's showing you the breakdown of the different treatments that were utilized. We use the same yeast strain for everything but the non-sac, which we used a Saccharomyces Luigi strain. Again, some of you, if you are familiar with brewing, you'll say, hey, that's a brewing strain. You're right, it is. It is a brewing strain because there isn't really been any wine in a strains developed yet, so we have to use what is currently available on the market for us. Now, the key differences we do want to point out is when we did a stopped fermentation, we wanted to make as little ethanol as possible, which is why, again, when we were joking about it must come in contact with the substrate, yeah, it did, 3 hours, so not much is produced. And then with the others, you'll also point out why did we only do 45 hours for the Saccharomyces. It's due to the fact that that is the recommendation by the producer of the yeast strain, which was, I believe, White Labs. So just wanted to point these out. But it does, in fact, impact your volatile compounds, which, to put a long story short on this, we utilized a SPME extraction using a dibenzylbenzene carboxylene polydimethylsiloxane, very long naming SPME fiber. That is a general workhorse in the VOC sector, their flavor chemistry sector, which I am in. It gives me a good characterization of all the compounds that will be found there. Now, when it came to the consumer panelist, we were able to recruit panelists from the surrounding community. So this is a fair number of University of Florida students, as well as a few people from the surrounding community. However, I will admit, we did not do market analysis on overall what the trend was for the panelists, but I can say they were probably closer to the 21, 26 range. We do have that data, but it wasn't something we wanted to focus on. The samples were presented in a very randomized order because, again, you don't want someone to be looking over at their neighbor and thinking, oh, that looks good, and then kind of compare it and compare the same sample at the same time based on other factors, because someone may be going, this is horrible, and influencing them. So we tried to randomize it. We also give, again, water and crackers to ensure that they are cleansing their palate throughout the process. We did a 9-point hedonic scale. This is a common scale for consumer liking. 1 being, if you're trying to determine what it is, 1 being the most horrible thing I've ever tasted in the world, 9 being the best. And then we also did a forced ranking. It is called a forced ranking because, again, guess what? You can't leave the booth until you rank it. So you're gonna rank the samples lowest to highest, low being 1, 4 being high, on what was your most absolute favorite thing in the world or which sample you preferred. Stats were run. Again, I call stats very boring. But most people want to go, what about the volatile composition? I recognize people look at this and get very scared. I recognize that. As a flavor chemist, I recognize that. The reason why I generally show overall organic compound groups, such as I have right here, is because it allows statistics to be done more holistically. When you're looking at a wine product or looking at something, you don't look at it as an individual compound like what a GC gives me. The benefit is I can figure out if there's an off flavor developed due to processing techniques. I can figure it out with my GC. But again, you need to couple that with sensory, which is what we did. We didn't see that, but I just wanted to say, like, I get it. This is very overwhelming. However, to put a very long story short, we did see changes in the volatile composition. I was not surprised by this, particularly if you're going to run a full fermentation, such as we did with the control. I'm going to see a lot of ester development. Let's see if I'm going to see a lot of esters, which we do see, which we see statistical difference in that, particularly because, again, these are secondary metabolites. This is what my yeast are doing. They're going to produce these fruity compounds that make the wine very enjoyable. You don't see that in the stopped fermentation, and you don't see it in the Mycotes. That's, again, because that yeast strain has kind of been bred not to really produce as many acids that are going to react. Again, to make an ester, you need an alcohol and you need a acid to get it, and we don't have as much of that. So that's why we see, again, statistical differences in this. But let's get to what most people want to see, is that consumer panel. We do see statistical differences throughout the consumer panel. Most of them, again, we're shifting more towards our the Mycotes as well as the stopped fermentation. Again, my theory on this was likely due to the fact that we do have a younger population. Again, 21 to 26 is heavily participating in a number of these studies because, again, that is the primary population that we do have on campus. We do, again, recruit from older, we do recruit in the other categories. However, I will admit, as a faculty member, I don't have time. So it does skew one way, and it is evident to skew in some of our data that we do acknowledge that. Especially when we're doing ethanol studies, some of that particular age group is a little bit they're not naive, but they're not as experienced as some groups. So it pulls it down a little bit, and we suspected they liked it more because it reminded them a lot of like the juice, which may be one way. So what's the takeaway from this? Well, there was statistical differences, particularly in the different methods, which, again, not surprising. Because, again, when you look at vacuum distillation, you're allowing it to do a complete and full fermentation, but at the end of it, you're then removing that ethanol. So you get to leave a lot of those fruity compounds in there. So it's not surprising. Again, with the non-Sac or the Saccharomycotes having the least amount of volatile compounds, that is, again, not surprising due to the fact that this particular yeast strain it's not been domesticated, and it's not really been bred to produce a lot of those volatile compounds that we expect from, again, a traditional Saccharomyces cerevisiae strain. When it came to the consumer panel, again, I was slightly surprised by the fact that our Mycotes ranked the highest. I do suspect it was due to the fact that it did remind or had more of a juice-like flavor to it than some of the others. We didn't see any statistical differences, again, between the vacuum distilled and the controlled, likely because, again, they shared very similar aromatic and flavor profiles due to the fact they were both complete fermentations. When it comes to the alcohol-reducing methods, all three are very viable. We should point that out. However, I always tell people you need to look at your process as a whole and make a decision on what's best for you. Because what's best for one person may not be best for another, but also you need to take into question, what do I want my end product to be? Do I want it to be more like a true traditional wine? Okay, then vacuum distillation may be the best option for you. However, it comes at a cost of the fact that you have to buy that unit. Also, you need to make sure that you are running it at an appropriate temperature because, again, if you run your vacuum distillation too high, you can still get some of those cooked or warmed over flavors. So just some ideas to think about. When it comes to Saccharomyces or Mycotes, so using a non-traditional, there needs to be looked at other strains to see if those might also be more viable and be able to produce a more flavor profile that you are interested. I pitch that because we are now coming up, or we will be publishing a paper looking at the utilization of non-traditional yeast for the production of Muscadine wines, hopefully later this year. So we are looking at, again, that for the production of NOLO products, just to give us an idea of what's going to happen. Any questions? No. So when you do a moonshine still, so we take it all the way down to almost no ethanol. So we have what's left over. So yes, you are removing the ethanol, almost like a still. We do back add in, because when we are doing a vacuum distillation, we're dropping the boiling point within it to preserve the product, but we're removing a lot of those volatile compounds, because those volatile compounds are the aromatics that you're smelling. Those are going to go over with the ethanol. So we have to back add some of those in, or your wine's going to not have much of a smell. Am I making sense, or am I confusing everyone? So when we do a moonshine or distillation, I just want to collect as much ethanol as possible, but I'm leaving behind anything that's non-volatile. Like my sugars, my proteins, they're going to stay behind in my moonshine. And you're also taking over all those volatile compounds in the process. So that's what happens. But also, when you do a distillate like that, you're also removing a lot of those color compounds aren't coming with you. So we know that if we were to, like when you do barrel, like aging, that's where our color is coming from the barrel, not so much from anything else. I can talk about distillation too. It's really fun. Oh yeah, you could definitely take that and, yeah, you could definitely age it and get a lot more flavor out of it. Yeah, you could do both if you so chose. But now you're dealing with a different level of the TTB. So that's the question, is like, if you're trying to make a NOLO product, the TTB will tax you based on the amount of, and Mr. Chris can tell you about this. I know from brewing and stuff that when we started going up to certain levels of ethanol, like remember how I defined it? They tax you based on that. And when you start hitting into distilled spirits, yeah, God help you. Because that's, again, because that's where we're getting that money from. Because again, vices are very expensive. That's another reason why we start seeing these NOLO products coming out. One, for the health benefits, but also because they're not taxed quite at the same rate as something that has ethanol in it. I can say that because I've had to, again, from other experiments that I've run, I've had to purchase in a beer, because again, I can adjust the ethanol on it for my project, and instead of having to try and make it where I'm doing like an extraction study where I'm doing 3, 6, 9% beer, it's easier just to go buy something pre-made and adjust it myself. That makes sense. I'm glad I'm not quite being run out of the room. I do wear red and black all the time. I am a Georgia grad. It's just y'all didn't hire me. They sampled everything. So the students were offered both. So here's the thing. Students were offered the control, which is, again, a full fermented product, and the other 3 reduction techniques. I have been asked by our sensory study team by Dr. Sims, not asked, but I've done the studies where, again, I will test predominantly distilled spirits, and I make it past the screening stage that a number of our younger, or of legal age, younger participants don't, because then they're not able to distinguish between different attributes within a product that someone who is slightly more experienced who can better differentiate that. That's a nice way to say I drink a lot. Yes, sir.
Great. Awesome. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
sorry.